let's talk about your legs. Or more accurately, let's talk about why you're still hiding them inside those sweatpants in July. You've been training legs for 2 years. You do 20 sets every Monday. You can't walk for 6 days afterward, and yet somehow your quads still look like 2 sad breadsticks. Here's the truth nobody's telling you. Your marathon leg day isn't the solution, it's the problem. Today, I'm giving you a high IQ, low volume blueprint that actually forces growth, because whatever you've been doing clearly isn't working. The frequency myth and the 72-hour rule. Let's start with the biggest mistake in your program, the bro split, 1 leg day per week. It sounds hardcore, it feels hardcore. It is, unfortunately, scientifically embarrassing. Here's what's actually happening inside your muscle after you train. Muscle protein synthesis, your body's muscle-building process, spikes. It stays elevated for roughly 48 to 72 hours. Then it drops back to baseline. That's your growth window. That's the biological clock you're working with. And if you're only training legs once a week, you're opening that window exactly 52 times a year. Now, if you train legs 2 to 3 times a week, you're opening that same window 104 to 156 times a year. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between legs that exist and legs that are actually visible through your pants. The soreness you feel for 6 days after your 1 weekly session isn't a badge of honor, it's a receipt for stupid programming. You didn't train hard, you just trained your body to be confused and broken for most of the week. Soreness means you created damage. Growth comes from tension. Those are not the same thing. Train legs 2 to 3 times per week with at least 48 hours between sessions. That's the rule. Everything else we're about to cover only works if you follow it. Quads, the press and the extension. Your quadriceps have one primary job: extend the knee, straighten the leg. 4 heads working together to produce that movement. But here's what most people don't know. 3 of those 4 heads, the vastus muscles, only cross the knee joint. The 4th head, the rectus femoris, crosses both the hip and the knee. And because it crosses the hip, it requires hip flexion to be fully activated. A pressing movement alone doesn't get it. That's why the leg extension exists, and that's why it belongs in your program. Now, before you start, a recommendation, not a rule. Consider doing your leg extension before your compound press. Not because of pre-exhaustion, it's the opposite logic. The leg extension is less systemically fatiguing than a hack squat or leg press. If you do it first, it won't meaningfully affect your pressing performance. But if you press first and then try to extend, your performance on the extension drops significantly. The leg extension is also the only exercise that trains the rectus femoris properly through its full function. Don't bury it after you're already gassed. Now for the compound press. Hack squat, pendulum squat, leg press, barbell squat, pick your weapon. These movements load the knee extension pattern under heavy resistance and are the primary driver of quad mass. But here's where most of you embarrass yourselves. The quarter rep leg press. You've seen it. 4 plates per side, maybe 5, a 2-inch range of motion, and the confidence of someone who has never once looked in a mirror on leg day. That's not training, that's just moving a sled to feel better about yourself. The only rep that actually matters is the one where the weight slows down involuntarily.
Here's the science. At the start of a set, your body recruits smaller, endurance-focused type 1 muscle fibers. They can sustain effort, but they don't produce much growth. As you push toward failure, those fibers fatigue. Your brain is forced to recruit high-threshold motor units, the type 2B fast twitch fibers, to maintain force production. That's when the bar slows down, not because you're giving up, because your nervous system is throwing everything it has at the problem. That involuntary slowdown is the signal that you've reached the fibers that actually respond and grow. Every rep before it was just the price of admission. This is why rep range matters less than proximity to failure. Research supports anywhere from 5 to 30 reps for hypertrophy. The sweet spot is 5 to 9. Why? Because it gets you to that slowdown faster, with more mechanical tension per rep. Stop chasing pumps with 25 rep sets and start chasing the point where the weight genuinely fights back. Hamstrings. Train both functions or stay small. Most people train hamstrings like this: 3 sets of lying leg curls, call it a day. and then they wonder why their hamstrings look flat from every angle. Here's your problem. The hamstrings have two distinct functions: knee flexion, bending the leg, and hip extension, driving the hips forward. If you only curl, you're training one function and completely ignoring the other. You're building half a hamstring, literally. Curls cover knee flexion. Seated or lying, that's personal preference, not a hierarchy. One is not superior to the other. Pick the one that feels better and allows you to train close to failure. But don't do both in the same session. That's redundant volume, and we don't do redundant volume here. For hip extension, you need a hinge, Romanian deadlift or single leg deadlift. This is where the other half of your hamstring development lives, and this is also where the most spectacular form breakdowns in the gym happen on a daily basis. The lower back ego hinge, you've seen it, someone loading up a bar, bending over with a completely rounded spine, bar swinging a foot away from their body, lower back doing all the work, basically auditioning for a spinal surgeon. That is not an RDL, that is a slow motion injury. The hinge is a hamstring movement. The bar stays close to the body, the hips push back, the spine stays neutral, and you feel the stretch in the hamstrings, not the compression in your lower back. If you feel it in your lower back, you're not hinging, you're just bending over with weight. Train both functions, one curl variation, one hinge variation. Done. The forgotten muscles: glutes, adductors, and calves. Let's talk about the muscles most leg programs either skip entirely or treat as an afterthought, starting with glutes. The gluteus maximus is the most powerful hip extensor in the body. Its entire job is to pull the thigh backward and stabilize the pelvis. And research consistently shows that hip thrusts produce up to 3 times higher glute activation than squats. Why? Because the hip thrust loads maximum resistance at full hip extension, exactly where the gluteus maximus is doing its primary job. The key to making it actually work, and not just a lower back or hamstring exercise, is 2 things: vertical shins throughout the movement at a full pelvic tilt at the top. Lock out at the top, squeeze. If you're not tilting the pelvis and fully extending, you're leaving the most stimulating part of the rep on the table. Pairing with the hip thrust is the abductor machine, and this is not an optional decoration. The gluteus medius sits on the upper outer part of your glute. Its job is to move the leg away from the midline and stabilize the pelvis. The abductor machine isolates this function directly. Developing the gluteus medius is what creates the glute shelf, that upper outer roundness that separates a flat backside from an actual developed glute. Hip thrusts build the mass, the abductor machine builds the shape. Train both. Now the adductor machine, the most skipped piece of equipment in the gym, usually occupied by one person or completely empty while every other machine has a line. This is a mistake with visible consequences. The adductors bring the leg in toward the midline and make up roughly 1/3 of your total leg mass. They sit on the inner thigh, directly under the skin, which means when they're developed, they fill the gap between the thighs and add immediate visible thickness to your legs from the front. You can have well-developed quads and hamstrings and still have legs that look thin from the front because you skipped the adductors. If the machine is maxed out in weight, use a gym pin to add resistance. Don't skip it because it feels like a weird machine. It's 1/3 of your leg. Finally, calves. And I'll keep this simple because most people overcomplicate it while simultaneously doing it completely wrong. The gastrocnemius, the visible calf muscle, has 2 functions: plantar flexion at the ankle and some contribution to knee flexion. It also crosses both the ankle and the knee joint. When the knee is straight, the gastrocnemius is in a lengthened, mechanically advantaged position to produce force. When the knee is bent, it shortens and slackens, and the deeper soleus muscle takes over the work instead. Which brings us to the signature move of people whose calves look like 2 pencils taped to their ankles. 100 reps, 0 range of motion, knees bent, just vibing. That's a soleus exercise at best, and a complete waste of time at worst. Straight leg, full range, controlled, every rep. That's the only way to actually train the gastrocnemius. Everything else is just movement for the sake of movement. The volume kill switch. 2 sets and 0 to 2 RIR. Here's where this protocol separates itself from everything you've been doing. You're going to start with 2 sets per exercise, not 4, not 6, not the 20-set destroy yourself and call it dedication session you've been running. 2 sets.
Research shows that beyond 2 hard sets per exercise per session, you start hitting serious diminishing returns. The first 2 sets, taken close to failure, do the overwhelming majority of the stimulating work. Everything after that is just accumulating fatigue with less and less return. Training for the pump might feel good for 10 minutes in the locker room. It doesn't build muscle. Mechanical tension builds muscle, and you don't need 20 sets to create mechanical tension. You need 2 good ones. Now, this is a starting point, not a ceiling. If, after a few weeks, you feel genuinely recovered, you're progressing well, and you think you can handle an additional set, try it. See if you continue to progress and recover. If yes, keep it. If not, drop back. The volume is a tool. Use it intelligently.
Rest periods. Between compound movements, hack squats, RDLs, hip thrusts, rest 3 to 5 minutes. Your heart rate needs to return to baseline, and your central nervous system needs to recover enough to reproduce maximum effort. Cutting rest short on compounds is one of the most common ways people accidentally reduce the quality of their sets without realizing it. For isolation movements, 1 to 2 minutes is sufficient. Progression. The only driver of muscle growth is mechanical tension. Progressive overload is your feedback signal. It tells you your muscles are getting stronger and growing. What does realistic progression look like? Adding 1 rep every 1 to 4 weeks, or a small increase in weight. That's it. That's a successful training cycle. It is not realistic to add weight every single session. Anyone telling you otherwise is either a beginner riding newbie gains or someone lying to you. If your lifts stall or regress for 3 to 4 consecutive weeks, that's your signal. You're under-recovering. The fix is not to push harder. The fix is to remove a set or increase your RIR. Give your body slightly more room to recover. Stagnation is not a motivation problem. It's a recovery problem. Treat it like one. Apply this or stay small. Here's the entire protocol. Train legs 2 to 3 times per week with at least 48 hours between sessions. Quads, leg extension plus a compound press. Hamstrings, 1 curl variation plus 1 hinge. Glutes, hip thrusts plus abductor machine. Adductors, do not skip the machine. Calves, straight leg, full range, controlled. 2 sets per exercise, 0 to 2 RIR, 3 to 5 minutes rest on compounds. Progress by adding a rep or a small amount of weight every 1 to 4 weeks. If you stall for 3 to 4 weeks, recover more, not harder. The metric for every single set is the involuntary concentric slowdown. When the weight slows down on its own, you're recruiting the fibers that grow. That's the only number that matters. Not how sore you are tomorrow, not how many sets you did, not how much weight is on the bar. So here's your choice. Take this protocol, apply it with actual intelligence, and come back in 12 weeks wearing shorts. Or keep doing your 20-set Monday leg day, keep wondering why nothing is changing, and keep buying baggier sweatpants. The biology doesn't care about your feelings. It only responds to the right stimulus applied consistently. Go find a hack squat. Subscribe for more bullying with biology. And for the love of all that is holy, stop bouncing your calf raises.